Welcome to Myth Informed. I'm your host, Brian Edward. Along with me is Michael, our progressive team member. Right?
Yep.
Is that the credential? So we're giving him that. So often we're misunderstood as a bunch of right wingers. So I wanted to restate our mission, and that is to promote viewpoint diversity with to promote viewpoint and diversity with the intention of limiting the effects of authoritarianism. The vision being a more pluralistic society. So we want to live by our vision, and we want to talk and engage with people that don't think the same. In fact, we need more dialogue. We need better discourse. We have an event actually named that, Better Discourse event, coming up on 7/11. So that's July 11th in Milwaukee, just ahead of the DNC. So today, we're going to bring in, and I'm sure we're going to get some disagreement here, Dan, the Logic Guy, who self-describes himself as a legendary left-wing shitposter whose exploits have been featured on such outlets as The Young Turks, The Majority Report, and InfoWars. Believe it or not, it's safe to say that this won't be an echo chamber. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. It's just a Dan Logic Guy. No the in there, and that is not self-described, by the way. Other people have described me as a legendary shitposter. So,
okay, fair enough. So that's good credential.
We're already getting started with the corrections here.
Well, no, that's good. That's the discourse. But we met on Twitter, right? So
I guess you could call it meeting.
Yeah, I think so. And the thing is, I think what you try to do, and what I try to do, is be relatively nice on Twitter, at least when you're engaging with somebody, so you can actually have a discourse. And that's how we started to DM. And
I'll be honest. Other people have not described me that way, but I agree with it. I think I try to be nice, but there's some mixed. I've gotten some mixed reviews.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think all of us can be snarky at times, and I wish I had a snarky font. There's times that I'll fire back a retort.
Yeah.
And am I looking for discourse then?
Yeah.
Probably not. But so we.
Yeah.
Then we agreed.
The way I see it is like I respond to people in kind. If you come at me with a bunch of bullshit and accusations, then I respond to you in kind with nothing but contempt. But if you're like a reasonable guy and you make some decent points and you're capable of hearing me out on mine, even if you're like even maybe mean, I'll give you the time of day and I'll treat you seriously. Like that's how I approach it.
That makes sense. Okay, cool. And we were going to talk today a little bit about the political geography of the left, where you think the Democratic primaries are going, kind of where you stand politically. But first, as a matter of almost credentials, that the stake gate keeps coming up when your name is looked for. What the heck is stake gate? Quick synopsis.
So stake gate, as I told you, I'm a shit poster. If there's anything I'm known for online, it's trolling Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin is a great trolling target for a multitude of reasons. So I kind of got on the map online when I pranked Dave Rubin's super chats. I sent him a $100 super chat asking him, hey Dave, have you heard about this SJW nonsense on the Majority Report? And he made it halfway through that super chat, and then he just started. He got to the words Majority Report because he hates Sam Cedar, and he just started like stammering and making these weird noises, and then he just stopped reading the question and was visibly mad about it for the rest of the episode. It was great, and then I contacted YouTube and said, hey, I sent this guy a $100 super chat and he didn't read the whole thing, and they sent me a full refund.
Holy shit!
So that was pretty good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
So which I then donated to charity, by the way. So a few months back, Dave Rubin was he was all I forget what he was mad about, but he was on a tear about something. It had to do with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for some reason. And people were saying he was mad. And to prove he wasn't mad, this was in a reply to Tim Pool, actually. He posted a photo of a steak of like a steak dinner he'd cooked himself, but it was like pretty much raw. He had cut into it, and it was like still like bright purple. And he said, "Oh, I'm not mad. I'm having the time of my life, enjoying my dinner. Thank you very much." And I looked at that, and just a thought occurred to me, popped in my head that, it'd be really funny if Dave found that image on Google and just lied about having a steak dinner to prove he wasn't mad. And then as soon as that thought popped in my head, it was just like, okay, perfect. And I just quickly photoshopped something together that made it look like he had found them. He had found that picture in the Google image results and posted it. And I thought it was going to be like, ha ha ha. This people are going to see that and have a good laugh. And within the first minute, I think it had 100 likes. And a bunch of media people had retweeted. Kyle Kalinske retweeted it and completely took it seriously. And so I was like, oh shit, I'm gonna have to take this down. But as I took it down, but it was already too late because people had reposted elsewhere. And within about 15 minutes, I think, Dave Rubin was trying to get this guy from Google fired for having posted the image. And he was on Twitter all night, like hours later, ranting about this one random product engineer from Google who had reposted the image and furiously tagging Google trying to get the poor guy fired just for repeating my prank, So there was Stakegate got a little bit of media coverage.
Okay,
some
so
people
it
wrote
really
some articles about it.
So it started from a troll where you make some quote unquote fake news that's inconsequential because all you're trying to do is just like joke around and then it
Right.
gets out of hand. Okay. Oh, that's
Right. Yeah.
totally interesting. That when I started hearing about that, I was like, what is going on? And it's just it's so much easier to see it from like I guess what's that, the Typhoid Mary, right? The first incident of where this takes off of what that was actually intended to be.
I was patient zero for Stakegate.
That's kind of cool. So you troll Dave Rubin and you take off. So where are you politically? You're a Bernie guy, right? But where would you say you are on the left?
I am a Bernie bro. That is correct.
You're a Bernie bro.
I'm a Bernard brother.
Okay, so if there's a -10, like if that's far left and +10's far right, like where are you that way? Or do you even describe the landscape like this? How do you create the map of the political left, and where are you on it?
No, we can't do it in quadrants. We have to use a 6-dimensional model that I'll walk you through, and I'll give you my exact coordinates within the 6-dimensional model.
Okay.
Okay.
Got it.
So dimension 1 is establishment versus Bernie bros, and that's very relevant right now because that's really what the primary is about, right? The primary is really about like, is this now the party of Bernie Sanders, or does the Clinton Obama DNC wing still have control?
No.
And so on that, I'm very firmly on the Bernie bro side of the divide. So I'm firmly in the Bernie bro camp. I don't. Someone asked me if I have who's my second candidate, and I'm like, bro, you don't want to ask me that question. Now is not the time to ask me who my second choice is, because I'm not in that mode. I'm firmly in the Bernie is going to kick all their asses and run away at the primary, and that's that. I'm not thinking about any other kind of compromise right now.
Just to point out, we have to consider another candidate because at the same, I'm 100% behind you about Bernie, 100%, but we know the DNC is going to potentially rig this thing. Potentially, they are going to rig this thing, and we have to face the reality that there may be a centrist tied to Bernie. And what are we comfortable with? Where can we draw a line? We have to draw some line.
My feelings on that are I will burn that bridge when I cross it.
Okay.
Okay, so right now
That's
you're in the Super Bowl. It's inconvenient to ask the quarterback when he runs out on the field, like, what are you gonna feel like if you lose, right? When they're all in the
exactly because I'm in that game mindset right now.
Okay, fair enough. So you had 6 axes. One was establishment versus, can I say populist? Does that make more? Is that a fair term to use?
can you say I mean, I guess you could say populist. I think Bernie bro is the best description, but sure, people
Okay.
say populist.
Establishment or anti-establishment? Okay, we'll do
Yeah.
that. So anti-establishment. What are the other ones?
Right. So the next axis, and this one is perpendicular to the establishment Bernie bro axis, is SJW versus dirtbag left. Now everyone knows what an SJW is, the social justice warrior is. Everyone's familiar with this term. They say that term on like sitcoms now.
Yeah.
But which I would describe an SJW as an adherent of like intersectional theory and philosophy is how I think the best way to describe that. But do people know the term dirtbag left?
I don't know it. I hear it tossed around, but I don't really get it.
So it's kind of, it's a term with kind of a storied history, to be honest. I believe it was coined by Chapo Trap House personality Amber Ailey Frost at Jacobin magazine in an article called like the Vulgarians of the left or something like that. And she was really influenced by an essay called Escaping the Vampire Castle by Mark Fisher. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it was written in 2012. And she took these ideas of sort of I don't know how to really summarize them, but just kind of embracing a sort of vulgarian aesthetic that like offends the kind of establishment gatekeepers, you know, who among other things are very into like kind of intersectional theory.
Yeah.
But
that's changed. So that's been in about like the last 6 years. But I think you're right. Like generally, I think the establishment is at least panders to a degree that to intersectionality.
Yeah. I'm not going to be able to describe it very well, but I highly recommend Escaping the Vampire Castle by Mark Fisher. And just Google Amber Ailey Frost and the Dirtbag Left, and that essay will come. Her essay will come up. I recommend reading those. But the Dirtbag Left has taken on kind of a different meaning, or sense around like summer of 2018. And now it's really represented by some key personalities, including, so there's a guy, an academic named Adolf Reed, who you can read an essay of his on the New Republic. But then more so these a few key podcasters that you may have heard of, Amy Therese, and then Anna, I never know how to pronounce her last name. It's an Armenian last name that begins with K, Kachian or something.
Kasparian?
And no, it's not Anna Kasparian. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Although she's also an Anna K, who's Armenian, so I guess that was a good guess, but totally wrong. This Anna Kachian was on. She was on Eric Weinstein's podcast recently. I didn't listen to it, but I just know she was on it. And what they've sort of embraced is like a wholesale, like, first of all, a adamant rejection of Me Too, and just sort of just sort of an almost 4chan type of aesthetic. They're even a little bit they're even a little trad in their politics. They're kind of social conservatives almost. They're extremely critical of sex workers, and they're not big fans of trans issues either. It's hard to summarize, and it's off topic. I've actually been doing some research for a deep dive that me and some friends are planning on doing for our podcast, called Blocked and Reported, where we go kind of in depth into like weird, obscure issues like this. Yeah. So it's not
you're not buying into intersectionality theory. You would not identify as an SJW or a social justice advocate.
I actually reject both. I actually reject both the SJWs and the Dirtbag Left, and I even see a lot of really unhealthy similarities between the two groups. They're both obsessed with like gatekeeping, especially in terms of like really obscure issues. They're both the Dirtbag Leftists deny this, but they're both shrill moralists who are constantly like scolding people for like moral failings. Me and a mutual acquaintance of ours, Brian, Science Triangles, Justin, whose podcast you went on. He and I did not a debate exactly, but we called it a left symposium with a key dirtbag left figure known as Fooly Cooley on Twitter, and we had like a 3-hour conversation about like our different ideas about it, which you can find on his channel for like a more in-depth. But suffice it to say, I on this I am square on the Bernie Bro access. I was firmly Bernie Bro. On this, square in the middle. I am not on either side, and I actually reject both sides. So I'm at a 0 on that.
Okay, makes
on
sense.
that access.
So what's third access?
The next access is BreadTube versus PizzaTube, which is a recent one. There's a dust up on the left right now.
Now, BreadTube
about,
is the way I understand it is like basically like ContraPoints is BreadTube. These are left-leaning people that are making their money through YouTube videos. Or am I totally wrong?
Here's how I'll describe BreadTube. BreadTube takes its name from a Peter Kropotkin essay called "The Conquest of Bread" that not very many people have read. I haven't read it, and it's just a funny word for left of center to far left content creators on YouTube. That's all it means. And people get very, very precocious or precious about the term, but in my opinion, that's a waste of time. It's a vague term, and the main people it applies to, people like you mentioned, ContraPoints, have never even embraced it. It's something that popped up on like on Reddit one day.
Okay.
But so that's BreadTube.
What's PizzaTube?
What PizzaTube is a term that I think got coined earlier today, possibly by me. I don't remember, but there's been sort of a BreadTube dissent movement recently. That it was sparked by ContraPoints constantly getting canceled, and she has like all these like obsessive haters.
Yeah.
But then also it has to do with people who believe that like making a living off YouTube is not like consistent with like leftist values, and so they are suspicious of the movement itself. And the reason we're calling it PizzaTube is because they've recently added like a sexual conspiracy angle to it. A prominent BreadTuber was accused of being like running this is their words, a Jeffrey Epstein type sex ring in his spare time. No evidence for this. That's why I'm not going to say who the person is, because I think it's a completely scurrilous, unsupported rumor. But so now BreadTube is supposedly involved in sex trafficking as well.
So
according to some people.
PizzaTube might be the people that like accuse ContraPoints of, oh my God, you're in the 1% now. You're too rich. You've canceled on leftist values. You're a horrible transphobe. All of this stuff.
Yeah. Yes, and I actually did a debate on that as well on a YouTube channel. I wasn't really that familiar with. I don't remember what it's called, but I appeared on that, and we debated like whether or not it was immoral for people to be making their living on YouTube. And I fall squarely on the side that I want content creators on the internet and beyond to be successful and find an audience and be able to provide for themselves. Okay. And I want to support them.
So that's 100% on the BreadTube side.
Yeah, 100% pro BreadTube. And some of my best friends are online are BreadTubers. And my key, if I have one goal in being online, it's that when someone goes to YouTube and does a search for, say, climate change, the first thing that comes up isn't Sargon of Akkad. It's someone who actually, wants to talk about the science of it, and isn't just an ideologue.
So we can get more into that later. Okay, just finish up the axes for now, and then we'll.
That's probably it.
Okay, so those are pretty good. Where am I on those? Like the BreadTube versus PizzaTube. Since I'm more center right, I'm probably on a different axis. So it'd be interesting to see how many axes I could come up with the right. But but specifically, so 100% on the BreadTube. Some people would say, well, Sanders is a huge socialist. Even oh my God, this guy's an old commie, right? That Ben Shapiro says that there's never an industry he didn't want to nationalize. So, like, do you think is that a straw man? Where do you fall on capitalism? Would you consider yourself anti-capitalist?
I would consider myself. So I did a debate recently where I was asked where like to describe my politics, and I said I was a libertarian socialist. And what that means to me is that the term libertarian actually that meaning of the term libertarian predates like the American meaning of like Ayn Rand and stuff. And like Peter Kropotkin was a libertarian socialist, and Noam Chomsky is a prominent libertarian socialist. And basically, what it means to me is that if I were in charge, if you asked like what kind of society, I like you're logic guy, you're in charge of making society. What do you want to be? I would favor small decentralized communities and democratized economies. I prefer the term democratized economy to socialism, partly because I haven't read that much Marx, also because unlike some people on the left, I'm not dismissive of the human rights track record of nations like the Soviet Union or China
Venezuela.
Venezuela.
Or even Cuba. But where I think I differ from the American mainstream is that I think that the track record of the U.S. and capitalist countries isn't significantly better, at least not to the degree that that we like to believe in the West. Like we keep our work camps in the Southern Hemisphere, so we act like our hands are clean, but in fact it's far from it. Everyone can recount the human rights atrocities of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, but during the Korean War, we bombed that country into the ground. American forces killed as many as 1 in 5 North Koreans during that war.
So that's an armed conflict.
Almost as many South Koreans too. We were bombing both sides. We were allied technically with the South Koreans. But if you've ever read Manufacturing Consent, which I just started reading,
I have.
It goes into.
I read it in college, so a long time
ago. About how we had to go to war with the North Koreans because we were bombing the South Koreans, but that's a whole.
But either way, that's an armed conflict, right? So that's different than just like bombing out of nowhere.
No, but Brian, it's ridiculous to launch that kind of attack on a country, and then when a totalitarian government forms in its ashes, be like, oh man, you guys are really bad at human rights. Whoa, come on, guys! Like that's hypocrisy.
Wow.
But don't you think that the reason that happened is more because China was not going to tolerate a unified Korea that's allied with the West, or specifically America, right on their border? That North Korea functions is like a buffer zone. And this is why we were so pissed with Cuba, right? We didn't want a communist country on our doorstep.
Well, this whole
to me, we talk about neoliberals on the left. To me, a neoliberal is just the American capitalist version of a tankie. Just an apologist for our own atrocities.
Well, I'm not talking about the Korean War sucks, right? A lot of people die in this, and you have the end result is not good. So I'm not being an apologist for us. I'm just saying what I think happened. But what's your contention that we just kind of like
what I was saying was not meant to excuse the well documented atrocities of the North Korean government. It was simply to say that I think that the pro-American version of events, I think, leaves out key details, and that if you consider the big picture, I don't think that the U.S. comes off as the good guys in the situation. Well, that's my only point. I'm definitely not like I veered into this topic just to say that I don't want to make excuses for communist countries.
Gotcha.
Right. That I am uncomfortable with the term, and that's why I prefer democratized economy as opposed to communist or socialist.
Yeah. Now, if every country, if every president post World War II was tried at Nuremberg, they would be hanged. But if
I
we
agree with
held
that,
up
yeah.
to that standard, every president, Obama, Bush, Clinton, every one of them. So we
I
are
agree with that.
by no means perfect in this.
Yeah.
I agree 100% with you on this.
The
I wanted to make a follow-up point about democratized economy, because we're going to get into the Democratic
what
field.
is that? What?
But it just means that I don't have
Well, Bernie
well,
said
let me put it this way. Let me put it. Andrew Yang has a slogan that I think is genius. I think it's a brilliant slogan. People-centered capitalism, right? That's
Okay.
Andrew Yang's,
Well,
like, I don't know if it's a slogan, but it's a catchphrase he uses.
What do you think
People-centered
of
capitalism.
democracy in the workplace? I think what is it called in Germany that of the board of directors, 30%, 40% have to be from the workers.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the principle we need to. I think that's the principle we need to apply in the United States.
Yeah.
Because we have democracy.
Corbyn was a big advocate of that as well, and I think
we have democracy.
I think it's a good principle.
At the ballot box, but we don't have it at our workplace where we spend a majority of our time. I'm a big proponent of Richard Wolff on this. I'm a big fan of his work.
I like Richard Wolff.
So I recommend
So
watching
is this
stuff.
part of what you call a democratized economy then? Is that concept?
Yes, yeah. But I was going to say about Andrew Yang's slogan, people-centered capitalism. That's a brilliant slogan, but it's also a contradiction. Capitalism is capitalist-centered. So what he's talking about is technically a type of socialism.
Well, it's customer-centered, right? I mean, people talk about
No,
profits.
it's not customer-centered.
But
it's capitalist.
but hear me out. That profits, right? We always talk about capitalism and profits, but it's really about profits and losses. Because if somebody makes a car and that car isn't selling, they're taking a loss on that. No one has to buy a crappy car that you don't want or some ugly shirt.
Okay, then don't go live in the inner city.
What?
People have to buy crappy cars that they don't want.
You can buy a different car.
Oh, really? Can you buy? A majority of people in this country cannot afford the newest car on the market. People can't afford them without.
What I'm
taking
saying
off
is there's
massive loans.
choice. There are plenty of cars. I mean, look at the Lemons, right? The Pontiac Aztec, right? That they lost a ton of money on that.
Yeah. That was a terrible car, but
Right.
people still buy it. Why? Because they need a car.
But not enough people buy it. They've lost a lot of money, which tells them don't make a car like that anymore. Right? I mean, that's them. That's the company being punished for not making good product. Right? So it's about profits and losses.
I think capitalism centers capital. Capital is about ownership.
Okay.
And it's about owning the means of production.
No, I agree that's what socialism is. But by owning the means of production, like it can absolutely stomp out entrepreneurism. Like it just seems like the Soviets, they owned the means of production, and then you had things like a car in East Germany, the Trabant, where there were no design changes from 1959 to 1991. Not one. You know, like that's the problem. You stick with what is working, it kills innovation, I think. I mean, how do you keep innovation?
I mean, I can point to stuff on our end, like that car that blew up and they didn't do a recall because they determined it wasn't cost effective.
Yeah, and then they got their ass sued for it. So there is, you know, that doesn't take back the life, right? Now remember, the Trabant also has a ton of design problems too. It's a 2-cycle engine, and it doesn't even come equipped with a heater. In fact, like you can get an option kerosene heater, which primarily started fires. So like the number one cause of fires in Moscow were TV sets, poorly built TV sets that caught on fire. So this is what I'm saying: is you could, you know, and then can you sue the government?
If you're saying that they got their asses sued, you're admitting that the market didn't solve the problem.
Well, I mean, obviously you can't bring back the life, right? So there's no way to solve that problem in that.
Well,
way.
no,
But
no,
you
no,
could
no,
provide
no,
monetary
hold on.
compensation.
The market couldn't address the issue of the recall. It had the state had to step in.
No, I guess
I
don't know what. Well, the regulation had to step in.
People had to
industry.
stand up against capital.
But I was just describing what my personal
Sure.
politics were.
There would,
as
I'm
I
sure
saw
there
them.
were regulations that came out of that, right? Like that, okay, now you can't design your gas tank needs to have whatever security things. So and yeah, and if they cover it up, I'm fine for their asses to get sued. But I mean the market and regulation. So market can't take care of everything. I totally agree. You can't have medicines out there claiming this will cure cancer, but it just actually, it is a hurtful product. You can't just say, oh well, they'll get a bad reputation. Right, you have to have regulations. I agree. So I'm capitalist that believes in regulation. And there again, what's the right amount? I mean, that's always the discussion. What's the right amount of regulation? So how is that different? Like a democratized economy? Do we really need like how is yours different than just more regulation? Like your vision?
I don't think a democratized economy has much to do with regulation, though. It's like Mike was. Your name's Mike, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like like Mike was saying. It's like worker owned co-ops. It's not being alienated from your labor. So like okay, so here's a stat that here's two stats that like really put me on this. The first is that the American worker so the American economy has been growing over the past, I don't know, 30, 40 years, right? Which means that the American worker productivity has increased, right, by that much, right? That's what that means. But the American worker hasn't seen that benefit. Their wages are stagnant, and if you take into account, the rising cost of home ownership, the rising cost of medical care, the rising cost of college education, we're probably getting poorer, and our lifespan is almost certainly actually going down over the past 2 or 3 years, according to people who study that sort of thing. So what you're seeing there, what that's called, is the alienation of our labor. So democratized economy is about addressing that alienation. And another stat that put me on this, wage theft in America, measured by the dollar, wage theft is more than 50% of theft in America. So if you take everything stolen and you count up the dollar value of it, rich people stealing from their own workers is more than half.
Okay, well, describe wage theft, right? I mean, like when I hear stealing
Wage
from
theft?
your workers,
Right.
I would think like that that payroll, like I was supposed to pay you $20 an hour, and for some reason I'm putting 18 and you're not catching it.
Is when you tell your floor manager at Walmart to punch out, but then go back to work.
Okay, well then,
Well, I think a more apt description possibly might be in the service industry, waiters and waitresses. Now, what typically happens is you collect tips. Your tips go into a pot at the end of the day, and some bosses will collect from that pot because it's cash. It's not.
I have worked in restaurants where that happens.
Yeah, they will collect from that pot, and then they give you a percentage, but that percentage is garnished for some odd reason based on whether you're black, white, Asian, sexist,
they're garnishing
or racist
it by
reasons.
Race.
Oh yeah,
that's straight. That's
It
gonna be
happens.
straight up illegal.
I'm not saying I've worked in a restaurant where I knew that was happening, but as far as just having them garnished, yes, I've worked in
Okay,
places
so they're
like that.
gonna like the boss wants to take part of the tip. Okay, that I agree. That kind of sucks, and you could say that's bullshit. Like and your other option.
But another example of this is just shorting people's checks, which happens a lot.
Okay, well,
You just short
but
their
don't-
checks, and then they're
what's
like,
the-
"Oh, I think I'm supposed to make this much," and they're like, "Oh, well, this tax went up or something."
Okay, well, so now if those are shady business practices, you probably go after them to at
Right.
least a degree. Now, can you
No,
hire a lawyer?
Brian,
person can't go
I
after
don't
them.
have this information in front of me, but there was actually I think it was a Supreme Court ruling that actually protected employers from class action suits about this.
Well,
It was recent. This was 2017 or 2018.
Okay.
typically when you if you're a service worker, you're not signing a contract, but
Yeah, that's another thing. Like
you-
a lot of work, like especially service workers. I think probably my working in the restaurant industry. I don't work in there anymore, but I used to when I was younger. I think probably put me onto a lot of this stuff because if you're ever in that, those people are extremely precariously employed, and they don't really have any recourse at all.
Okay, so but you're talking about
their only real way of taking on their employer is class action suits,
Sure.
which they have passed laws to protect employers from.
So but what you're talking about are kind of shady business practices, right? Like in the corporate world, you can have, say, some small company comes out with X innovative new product that's really cool. Company that's 20 times larger steals it, straight up rips off the intellectual property, starts making it, right? Smaller company files suit, but meanwhile, bigger company sells a bunch of stuff. You could get that sold, then settle the lawsuit and still make a profit. Like knowing that these people are going to have a hard time suing you, it's going to take forever. This is a shady business practice.
It's called patent trolling, and it's rampant.
Yeah,
in America.
but right, but it's
rampant in the world right now.
It's a shady business practice. Yeah, and like I don't think we're going to get rid of like the capacity
I feel
for
like
shady
you're
business
using
practices.
this term shady business practice to sort of like be to kind of hand wave away the stuff is. But both of these examples are just rampant in the business world today. Patent trolling is a huge problem.
But why? But why?
Right
why
now.
could? Why? Why does that? Why do we have to own the means of production? Why can't or regulation be targeted to stop stuff like this?
I think we shouldn't talk about it in terms of ownership of production. We should talk about it as production sharing, right? Because the worker should share in the profits, share in the production, share in what happens with what they're producing.
I like the way you say it. You said that, and it kind of dovetails with the way I don't really embrace these like full-on Marxist terms. Partly just because I haven't read enough Marx, but also, like I said before, I'm a little wary. I'm not dismissive of the problems with socialism and communism. It's just that I think that we need to address the problems with capitalism as well.
We're behind the eight ball in terms of the propaganda on the left. Besides, like the right has had a giant head start on the propaganda war, and we need to be more aggressively marketing these things.
Right, but the ownership of the means of production brings you back
really
to.
Agree with you about that, Michael.
Well, like it brings you back to what the communists were doing. I mean, the gulags talk about owning the means of production, right? They essentially
we have
gulags
in the United States.
Oh, I'm not
we
saying we do.
Talk about the Soviet gulags, but we imprison a larger portion of our populace than any other country, and we have more prisoners than China than any other country. And the reason is because we monetarily incentivize it.
Yeah, private prisons.
Okay, but you could.
Yeah, but private prisons are a huge problem. But they're a small portion of the prisons in the U.S. But even in the public prisons, even in the federal and state level prisons, we're still incentivizing it through prison labor. So even if they're not private prisons, we're still exploiting their labor. I mean, Brian, you know about like the 13th Amendment, right? That prison labor is actually a loophole in the 13th Amendment.
Right, and what you're talking about is slavery and indentured servitude.
If people haven't seen the 13th Amendment documentary on Netflix, I believe, check it out because it is fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so
right, I'm down to talk about this, but I would also like to talk about the Democratic primary.
Okay, yeah, let's go on. So we'll shelve that for what's going to win there later. Yeah, and we'll kind of kid out my opinions because I want So you're at Sanders. So I kind of want to see
I'm a Bernie bro.
Yeah, you're right. So where are the other folks, and what do you think? What's the most significant thing that's happened in the primary in your opinion in the last couple of weeks?
The last couple of weeks?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the thing I'm most excited about is just Sanders taking the lead.
Yeah, he took the lead,
having opening up a 15-point lead in New Hampshire, and I think he's going to win. So that's the biggest, the most significant thing to me. But probably like the most fun thing to talk about would be the drama between him and Warren, which has been excellent to watch it unfold.
Right. So a lot of people put these two somewhat together. If you're on the right, a lot of times you can't see the distinction. You see, wow, Warren's far left, Bernie's far left. What do you see is the main difference between Warren and Bernie?
Warren's not far left. Are you kidding me?
But if you're over here where I'm at, it's farther away.
Brian, you just set off a hand grenade in the middle of this conversation.
Okay.
Now Warren,
was it one of those
I wanna-
frag grenades or like a high explosive?
I want to be pragmatic slightly here. Warren is more progressive than, say, Klobuchar or Biden. But like that's a comparing. I go back to this. It's like comparing Ted Cruz to Beto O'Rourke, right? Beto O'Rourke was progressive, but anyone's progressive when you compare them against Ted Cruz.
On your axis is Warren, establishment, also SJW, and I know bread two pizza stew probably doesn't apply. But
so here's the thing. Here's been Warren started off as like, oh yeah, I'm with Bernie. I'm in the Bernie lane. But as she's been going further and further, what her branding is now is she's the unity candidate. And what that means is and if you look at how she's positioning herself and to the kind of messaging she's using and the people she's talking to, her argument right now is that she's an establishment candidate that the left will accept. That is completely 100% the Warren sales pitch at this time. She's like, oh, if you nominate Biden, the Bernie Bros will stay home and they'll do us dirty again because they're all obsessed with Bernie Sanders having cost them the 2016 election because they're delusional. She's making the argument that she's the establishment-friendly candidate that the Bernie Bros will show up for.
Oh, so she's splitting the middle between Biden and Bernie?
Yeah. I would say she is actually in the Biden lane, but yeah, she's positioning herself as the unity candidate, which just means compromise. She's the compromise candidate.
Got it. Okay, and how's that resonating? What's your opinion on
that?
That?
If you look at her voters, what you'll find is that they're coming entirely from the establishment lane. I don't think that she's taking vote. I mean, if the fact that Bernie has surged ahead recently, while she's fallen, means that all of the lefty, socialist, progressive people have abandoned her campaign, and where she's taking from right now is the Buttigieg's, the Bidens, and of course the Amy Klobuchars.
Because she's a woman.
Because she's a woman.
And it's
yes.
sexist to criticize Elizabeth Warren if you disagree with her.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
Another really funny bit recently, I think, was the New York Times op-ed endorsement.
Yeah.
That was a fantastic fuck up.
Right, I know.
That
We
was
endorse
awesome.
Warren and Klobuchar as two different alternative visions for America. It's like that would be like saying we nominate, we're coming out for Trump and Hillary. It's just weird. They have two different visions.
And what's fascinating about to me, and it shows, I think it shows very sharply the distinction between the Bernie Bros and the Liz Lads, is the Liz Lads ate it up. They were like, "This is brilliant. This is fantastic." Lauren Duca wrote an article about how this was a visionary move that proved that we were at last ready to move beyond toxic masculinity politics. And they ate it up. And the reason they ate it up is because they fundamentally misunderstand power. They on some level, it sounds crazy to say, but their actions reinforce this. On some level, they don't understand that this is a competition where you're trying to win in order to take power for your side. They don't understand that elections are that, possibly because their heads are filled with a bunch of fever dreams from West Wing episodes and stuff like that.
or the intersectionality. It was almost like the entire endorsement was just a nod to intersectionalism.
Well, it was kind of because I don't have. I wish I had the op-ed in front of me, but there were lines that basically spoke to that. That we're taking we're dividing it into two camps: the establishment camp and the Bernie Bro camp, and then we're picking the women because it's time.
Yeah.
It's time for women.
If Kamala was still in there, they would have made a triumvirate.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
Because you mean because they forgot Tulsi?
Oh yeah, I forgot Tulsi.
My apologies to any Tulsi supporters
What did you mean by triumvirate?
The three. They nominate. Could you imagine? Like, what if Kamala Harris is in there? Would they have nominated three? It seems like Tulsi's considered a Republican.
I think they would have nominated Harris and Warren.
Okay.
I think they would have grouped them on either side of the divide.
And forgotten about Klobuchar because she's small.
Club of who?
Yeah, because they would have just taken whoever was leading on that side, I guess.
Right. And like Tulsi's been demonized as a Republican, although when you get into Bernie circles, you get some more positive feedback about Tulsi. What's your thought on Tulsi Gabbard?
I used to be a huge Tulsi stan. Like around 2017. I was like very big, like, oh, definitely Tulsi's like the right person for 2020. I liked her war record, or her anti-war record, I guess. I liked that she sided with Bernie in the 2016 race, and I liked that she went to, unlike Elizabeth Warren, noted Native American Elizabeth Warren. Sorry, cheap shot, but I had to take it. She went to the Standing Rock during the DAPL. And protested there. I thought that she was a really great politician. She was like I would tell people she was my favorite congressperson. But I kind of started to have I kind of started to sour on her before the 2020 election even started, and I'm pretty down on her at this point. The thing that like really made me like turn on, like finally, like the straw that broke the camel's back was a kind of obscure issue. But during the 2018 election, she refused to debate her primary challenger, and I hate it when politicians do that. And it's like really like a key issue for me, because so many politicians I loathe have pulled that move, including in local politics where I am. So that really like soured me on her. And then her connections to Modi and the RSS party go deep. Than I had initially understood. It includes stuff like fundraising, and like a key principle that I believe in is who is funding your ideas is just as important as the ideas themselves. So
what's the RSS party?
The RSS is I'm not going to be able to unpack it very well, but it's basically it's a group that's affiliated with Modi's Hindu Nationalist Party, the BJP in India. Yep. I can send you a great article that summarizes it better than I can.
But that's fair enough, right? Okay, so that connection. Michael, you like Tulsi. You want to see a Tulsi, a Bernie ticket.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Why? So why are you different there?
I see, I get it. Tulsi has her flaws. All candidates have their flaws, and that's part of the reason I'm not supporting Tulsi as president. I have a Tulsi bumper sticker on my car. I was a big supporter of her early in this race, but she is the best to partner with Bernie because she's the attack dog that he will never be. He is, I love Bernie, but he's not an attack dog, right? He is I don't want to say he's a career politician because he's not, but he is part of...
He is
like, he's been in politics so long, he sees these people as his friends, as his coworkers, as his colleagues. And fundamentally, they're not in this 2020
So she can
election.
be the bad cop and he's the good cop? Is that the idea?
Pretty much. But the other part of it also is Bernie's foreign policy record may have some holes. Her foreign policy record has 0 holes. 0.
I very
not
strongly
0, but
disagree with you on that. She's actually she doesn't get. No one ever points this out, but she's a real flip-flopper on foreign policy. On the Iran deal, she has done a complete 180, as much of a turnaround as is possible on that issue. She was. I'm pretty sure she voted against it when it was before Congress, and she was a vocal critic of her. She was. You can find an article on national. I think it's National Review on their website or whatever. One of those. Or no, I think it's the Weekly Standard actually.
Okay.
One of those neocon rags where they're praising in 2015, keeping just giving a tongue bath to Tulsi Gabbard and her reasons. The reasons were primary. There was a couple things. She was known for fighting with Obama, so they're like that. But the two things, the Iran deal and then her at the time stalwart support for Israel, which again, she's just done a complete 180, as much of a turnaround as any one person could do on a single issue. So I just completely disagree that she has doesn't have holes in her record. She supported the Iraq War at the time when she was an elected legislator. She did support the Iraq War.
Okay. But
well, she went. So, she was a military. She was in the military, and she went to war. She volunteered.
But the timeline there was that she was the one. I think the youngest elected representative in the country. She was elected to the Hawaii State Legislature, I think, when she was 21, and when the war started in 2003, she was a vocal supporter and left the legislature to enlist.
Yep.
So I mean,
believed the lies that were told to us by the establishment.
It's correct to say that she was an elected representative when the Iraq War, during the buildup to the Iraq War, and she is on record supporting it. So that's a huge flip flop.
But I mean, like,
It's the other thing though is it's a flip flop to the right position. We have to also characterize it as like, okay,
sure.
She had these wrong positions, but she's moved to the correct position over time, right. And we can't.
I agree with that, and I think she has a good record. And I especially, she's the only one who's talked about Assange. I think she's the only elected politician in America who's gone on the record about Assange. So she deserves tons of credit for that.
Yeah. Marianne Williamson talked a little bit about it, but
she's not an elected politician.
Right. So I mean, I don't know. We could do a thing on like the Iran deal, but like let's kind of.
No, I don't want to do that.
Okay, yeah, because I'm like, no, I was opposed to it as well. But where do you see?
Are you still opposed to it?
I like the deterrence. So I think whether Trump like stumbled into the right deal, I think this is what happened there.
Wait, you can't say he stumbled into the right deal because we don't have a deal.
I mean,
sorry,
stumbled into deterrence, like into a Reagan, a non-deal, like a Reagan-style deterrent. It worked with Libya with Gaddafi, and I think it will work with Iran.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I mean, that's just my position. I feel like he stumbled into the right. You're right, not deal, the right action. So, okay, what else in the primary? Like, is Bloomberg? So it seems like what his strategy is, right? We're going to see like 25 Super Bowl ads, I guess, with Bloomberg just throwing money. That what they're worried. There's so much fracturing in like the Democrat. What I think you're putting some light on between establishment and anti-establishment, that he can kind of come in and everybody votes for him because it's some kind of neutral third party or sort of, and maybe pick up some Reagan Democrats.
I'm confused on what you're saying. Are you saying
that he's trying to exploit the fissure, and maybe he sees like the Millennium Falcon going down the fissure of the Death Star can somehow make it out and win the race by with the Bernie people
I would
saying,
just say that Bloomberg is firmly in the Biden lane, and he is absolutely no threat to Bernie Sanders whatsoever. And the only impact he could possibly have on this race is to take votes away from Biden and hand the nomination to Bernie.
But what in the general, I think what they're worried about is if an establishment candidate wins, that Bernie Bros will not vote for said candidate, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. So maybe he could be some kind of neutral thing, and they'll be like, well, at least we're getting rid of Trump.
Bloomberg would get 1% in the general election.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, that at least we're getting rid of Trump mentality is exactly all that is wrong with the establishment mentality in the 2020 election.
So, all right. So then you kind of just don't want to look at the question right now. If Sanders were to lose, like what you would do. Is that correct? Like,
I mean,
if it was a Biden-Trump general,
Bloomberg would only be a factor in the general if Sanders won.
Okay, but what if it was a Biden-Trump general? Like, you got into a car accident, you woke up in a coma, you're fine, you're not injured.
I can answer that definitively because I am done voting for Iraq war criminals. It's never happening ever again. I've been guilted and cajoled into it twice, and it's not happening a third time. They can lose without me.
What about Warren?
Warren, let me put it this way. If to a nominee, Elizabeth Warren, I'm a gettable voter. She could win me over.
Okay.
She just has to work at it.
She has to pivot to the left in the general. She'll have
She
to.
she would have to really signal that she meant her promises, and that she's not, working with Clinton and these other cronies and hacks,
Can you
and
imagine
that she's like running a different kind of campaign.
Can you imagine if she picked Clinton?
It would be
as her
hard,
VP?
but she could do it. I'm absolutely a gettable voter for her in the general.
Fast forward to like what if Bernie pulls it off, right? And I don't think that's completely unrealistic. Heck, Trump pulled it off, right? So I mean, if Trump could pull it off, Bernie could pull it off. You're on that ballot.
By pull it off, what do you
meaning
mean?
he could win the presidency. Meaning
so he's elected president.
Correct. What do you see a Sanders presidency like? Do you see the right freaking out? Do you see the Senate changing? What does that make on foreign policy? So if you're somebody on the right like me that fears this,
I mean,
right?
I mean, the right, unlike the Republicans, unlike the Democrats, are like an extremely competent opposition party, and their strategy for a Sanders presidency will be exactly the same as it was during the Obama presidency, which we saw, which is to have these town halls and call everything socialism.
Yeah, they're. I mean, if God forbid Mitch McConnell gets reelected, but they're going to block every policy in the Senate.
Sure,
they're going to stonewall him. And here's the other thing: the Democrats are also going to stonewall him. The corporate Democrats are going to stonewall Bernie. They're not going to.
But you do get some establishment. Biden said he wasn't sure. Like, Hillary had to walk back that she wouldn't support Bernie. Now she says, yeah, I will. And then Biden said he,
Well, one thing we can say for sure is that if Bernie gets the nomination, we will see a freak out unlike anything we've ever seen before.
Why do you want that?
A whole bunch of these. It would not surprise me to see MSNBC just flat out endorsing Trump.
Okay.
Wouldn't shock me.
Mm-hmm. So, but why do you want that? Because now he'd have a lot of latitude. The president has a lot of latitude over foreign policy. So there's a lot of things that he could do there that the Congress necessarily or is going to have a hard time opposing, or either can oppose. So, but why do you want to see a Bernie presidency if you do think the Republicans will stall him on this? Do you think that there will be a compromise, or is it an FU to the system?
First of all, you're kind of just describing our dysfunctional political system. For one, I mean, the Senate is a do-nothing chamber. Nothing gets through the Senate. That's not anything new. President Bernie Sanders isn't going to have a harder time with the Senate than a President Amy Klobuchar. It's delusional that establishment Democrats think that Mitch McConnell is going to work with Amy Klobuchar. He has flat out said he is not going to. During the first Obama term, he's flat out said our strategy is to make sure that Obama is a one-term president. So we are just going to oppose everything right out of the gate. That's going to be their strategy. This delusion that anyone's going to work across the aisle is crazy, except in one area, which is foreign policy, because that is an area where there actually is a bipartisan coalition in Congress. Bernie authored a resolution about ending our involvement in Yemen, and it was supported by a bipartisan coalition in both houses, and it passed in both houses, and it was then vetoed by Trump. So, areas like that, scaling back on American empire, on American hubris, on the surveillance state.
What about Israel, though? That's the big one.
Well, he's going to. He said publicly, or at least he said it on a Kyle Kalinske show, that he will use the leverage of their aid package to say. Okay,
wait. Are you saying Bernie said that?
Yes.
He was on the Kyle Kalinske show.
He went on Kyle Kalinske. Yep.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I mean, yeah. I caught him on Chapo Trap House. I did not catch him on Kyle Kalinske.
It was like
I don't watch Kyle that much.
It was a 10
I like Kyle. I just don't watch him that much.
But he said, yeah, I'll use the aid that Israel gets as leverage to create a peaceful two-state deal,
Right.
or
A
whatever.
quid pro quo,
Right.
if you will.
Right.
Quid pro quo.
Right.
As Alan Dershowitz used that specific example today in the.
Yeah.
I never watched this trial, but I
know.
just saw.
It's so
that
dumb.
clip really made the rounds, so I saw that.
Yeah, it's like if the Trump's trying to say he's like, I didn't even do the quid. Like a quid pro quo is fine. It's sort of how foreign policy is done. His defense is silly. Like, I mean, his personal defense. I think his lawyer's defense is good. It's just, I don't know. I don't want to get into that. But like, so what do you think he's going to move on?
Let me just say that Dershowitz is a sex criminal who killed his wife.
Okay, but like it's arguments though. I mean, like a lot of lawyers are shady. I mean, but the question is, it's.
I don't know if a lot of lawyers were on Little St. James Island with Epstein and then killed their wife.
Fine,
okay.
but we shouldn't hold a client like guilty for the sins of his attorneys.
No, I agree. Donald Trump is not responsible for Alan Dershowitz's dalliances.
All right, fair enough. But what do you think? Where do you think he moves on foreign policy? Like that. What happens with Israel? Like, does he? What's he going to say? That you have to stop building, you have to pull out of settlements? I just don't think the Palestinians want peace. They were given so many deals, and they've turned down every one.
We can go down a ton of rabbit holes on this, but our producer is giving us the signal that we've got to wrap it up here because it's late.
Oh man!
And we can definitely have another
I guess
show.
we're not going to be able to solve the Israeli-Palestinian problem tonight.
In 30 seconds. I mean, I'd love
to do a part 2.
Well, yeah, I'd love to like drill down on specific issues, and those are the listens. Like, if you want to throw out what you think would be the best to drill down, but the foreign policy thing, it worries me a little bit. I don't like the fact that Linda Sarsour.
Well, I'll tell you what worries me about our foreign policy. I don't. How many countries do we currently have combat in? It's about 7 or 8. I couldn't name them off the top of my head. We get involved in these quagmires that just cause other quagmires, and we have no exit strategy. We don't know how to get out of them. Our foreign policy is completely out of control. That's what worries me about.
Fair critique. If you're going in, you have to know what's happened. I do think that we've gotten in a lot of wars that we have not had a good exit strategy on. And
there was a really illustrative moment in Trump's first few weeks in the presidency where it was announced that 4 U.S. soldiers had been killed in combat in Nigeria. Yeah, it was like the first week or two. And I thought, like, we have combat in Nigeria for what? And to the best of my knowledge, it was never brought up again or ever answered. I went back every few months and researched it, and there was no follow-ups. We just all simply accepted that we had U.S. troops. They were in combat in Nigeria, and 4 of them died, and we just moved on. And the interesting thing about that case was that the operation was planned by the Obama administration, but carried out by the Trump administration. So you can't point your finger at whichever supervillain you love to hate. This wasn't about Democrats or Republicans. This was about 40 years of U.S. foreign policy that's completely unchecked and out of control, in my opinion.
Okay.
I 100% agree.
Well, this is cool. I like the fact that you delineated not all Bernie supporters obviously the same, and you're giving us a little bit of talk back. Because, I mean, before you start arguing, I think you almost really have to understand where the person is coming from. And I definitely feel like I know you better there. And I get a sense of like what the Bernie voter is, because I think right now Trump voters fear Bernie voters and vice versa, and we gotta, this can help to dispel that, like what's really going on. Because I mean, I don't think that you are an evil person, that's for sure.
Thank you. I don't think you're evil either. It was great being able to talk to you guys.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll dig deeper on something. Maybe we'll talk on what our best issues are. We'll also take comments into the take. Awesome. This is a good example of better discourse. If you want to consider coming to that at a 7-Eleven in Milwaukee in front of the DNC. Dan, Logic Guy, follow him on Twitter. We'll link that in the show notes. And hey, appreciate the discussion and the honesty.
Yeah, thanks. And it was great to talk to you, Mike.
Yep.
Great talking to you.